West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Like I said, the court heard two challenges to the Texas law today. The first was from a clinic that provides abortions in Texas. The second was from the U.S. Justice Department. The Justice Department's case was argued by the brand new Solicitor General of the United States, Elizabeth Prelogar. And because the Justice Department went second, she had the benefit of having the last word today as the justices consider both of these challenges to Texas's ban. Both the Texas Clinic and the Justice Department are asking the court to allow their challenges to the Texas law to go forward, to ignore Texas's claim that, having vigilante random citizens enforce this thing means that this thing is insulated from federal court review. But this is how she closed the arguments today. Listen to her explain to the judges the implications if they side with Texas instead.
The final point is to just step back for a moment and think about the startling implications of Texas's argument here. Across the arguments this morning, Texas's position is that no one can sue, not the women whose rights are most directly affected, not the providers who have been chilled in being able to provide those women with care, and not the United States in this suit. They say that federal courts just have no authority under existing law to provide any mechanism to redress that harm. And if that is true, if a state can just take this simple mechanism of taking its enforcement authority and giving it to the general public, backed up with a bounty of $10,000 or $1 million, if they can do that, then no constitutional right is safe. No constitutional decision from this court is safe. That would be an intolerable state of affairs, and it cannot be the law. Our constitutional guarantees cannot be that fragile, and the supremacy of federal law cannot be that easily subject to manipulation. So we would ask this court to hold that the United States can proceed with this action and affirm the preliminary injunction entered by the district court and immediately vacate the stay that the Fifth Circuit entered in this case so that Texas cannot continue to deny women in its borders a right protected by this court's precedents one day longer.
Thank you, counsel. The case is submitted.
The case is submitted. If they can do this, then no constitutional right is safe. No constitutional decision from this court is safe. That would be an intolerable state of affairs. It cannot be the law. Our constitutional guarantees cannot be that fragile. She was sworn in as Solicitor General of the United States on Friday. This was her day at work at the Supreme Court today. Joining us now is our friend Dahlia Lithwick. She is senior editor and legal correspondent for Slate.com. She's the host of their Amicus podcast. Dahlia, it's great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
As somebody who knows these cases and the expectations for these arguments like the back of her hand, I just wanted to hear from you today. I know that you were able to listen into the arguments, as we all were. It is amazing to be able to hear them live and in real time as oral arguments, even when we can't be there in person. What did you think? Well,
first off, I just want to point out that summation that you just played by the brand new Solicitor General really ticked off, boom, 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 the way she peeled off 3 of the conservative justices today. She mentioned $1 million, the quote-unquote bounty that is $10,000. It was Chief Justice John Roberts who brought up the hypothetical. What if it's $1 million? Would that change things? Then she ticked off, what about gun owners? Can you go after them? That was Brett Kavanaugh's concern. And third, she went right to Amy Coney Barrett's concern with this case, which is people cannot effectuate their rights in the Texas state courts if this law is allowed to stand. So she just absolutely, masterfully, I think it was a magisterial kind of pulling in all of the doubts of the 3 justices. She only really needed 2 of them, but I think that what you saw right there, what you heard right there, was her being so attuned to the weak spots in Texas's argument, and then saying, come sit by me, Justice Kavanaugh, come sit by me, Justice Barrett, and the Chief Justice. I think we could get to 5 to strike down this law. It was really a tour de force.
What do you make of the fact that this was heard so quickly by the justices? Does that also tell us anything about how they are inclined? Why do you think they made the decision that they would hear this so quickly? I mean, a 10-day turnaround in terms of getting oral arguments is just unheard of.
Rachel, I've been calling that shadow docket decision that let the law go into effect in September the biggest self-own, a totally unnecessary self-owned by the conservatives on the court. They know that Jackson, the case that's going to be argued 1 month from today on December 1st, could have been the vehicle to erode Roe. Why do it in this sloppy, slapdash way that allows Texas to sort of single-handedly overturn Roe? And so I think what you saw happen was a huge outcry across the country about the shadow docket, how this happened at midnight with a paragraph unsigned order that women and pregnant people in Texas were suffering outcomes from being denied abortion, and then the polling around the court that just cratered after this. And what you saw, I think, was on a dime, the court saying, maybe we should have heard this. Maybe this should have been argued and briefed, and we should have treated this as though it is a serious constitutional problem. So yes, it was a very short turnaround. The court really calendared this with 10 days to get it briefed and argued. As you said, we haven't seen that since Bush v. Gore, but nothing has changed on the ground, I think, except that the court looks really, really dumb for letting Texas, in effect, make the court look weak and frail. And so that's why I think with 2 months after, the court said, we better hear this as though it's serious, because you know what? It's kind of serious.
Do you think that the quick turnaround in terms of them hearing it means that we'll also have a quick ruling?
I think so. I think we'll have a quick ruling, and let's be really clear, because I think we haven't said it. This is not a decision on the merits. This goes to nothing that has to do with whether Roe and Casey are good law. That's coming in Dobbs. That's coming in a month. But I think for the court to save face, they can at least say, maybe Texas shouldn't be allowed to make us look stupid in the future. We'll get to the merits of Roe very, very soon.
It is Tuesday, the 2nd of October of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash. A mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Hey, election day in America, so you know what to do. Of course, many of us have already voted because we have mail-in ballots in our states. And Oregon being one of them. Though today I am dropping off my ballot on election day because every now and then I like to remember what it was like when we would line up with our neighbors. Some of us would even get dressed up to go vote. And I really like that sense of community. Though, on the other hand, it's hard to hack paper ballots. That's why they, with a capital T, have been so adamant that paper ballots we got to get rid of paper ballots. Yeah, they put all this effort into placing all these hackable voting machines out there so that they could, blame the hackable voting machines for them not winning? What? Yeah, well, you cannot hack a paper ballot, and I'm putting my paper ballot in the drop box at the library here in town. Especially now with DeJoy, I would not trust his ability to deliver the mail on time because he's putting so much effort into delaying the mail. And a bunch of, once again, a bunch of obstacles have been put in place at the U.S. Postal Service just before this midterm election. Which is a problem because it's not just votes being delayed, but medicine to the elderly, which we are all becoming now. Boy, are we. There's some people that they cannot miss a med. And DeJoy is, I would say, personally responsible for any deaths or injury incurred because of those delays, you would think. All right, well, I read another poll, and it looks like an even greater majority of Republicans believe that violence is the only answer to get their way. Because apparently they haven't been able to get their way in all the other things they've been trying to get their way over. As if they haven't been getting their way, but they want everything. They don't want to have to worry about us gumming up the works. And how are we gumming up the works? Well, due process, equal protection under the law. Those sorts of things, they cannot stand it. Not one whit. And that was pretty much evidenced in the Supreme Court hearing yesterday over the Texas law. And that was at the top, too. I mean, the absurdity of it was laid bare during those arguments. Yeah. And the only thing, I love this, the only thing that will prevent the Republicans from pushing through this onerous Texas abortion law is that they're finally figuring out that what you mean they with the emphasis on Democrat they could use this law to go after guns. You mean just anybody in America could sue a state because they're pro-gun? That's the only thing that kept them from advocating the implementation of the Texas law. The conservatives on the court seem to be maybe a little hesitant to allowing Texas to proceed. Because if they do, it could have some unintended consequences, and they're not going to give up their guns. No, they can't. Okay, well, they said first that their guns were only for hunting. And then when we argued, well, if you're hunting, I mean, why would you destroy an animal with that military-grade weapon? It would just tear them apart. And then they said, oh, no. What we mean is we need these guns for protection because of all the crime. And when crime statistics show that crime was actually going down, including murders, then it was, really what we meant is that we need these guns to overthrow the government. And we all laughed and said, are you kidding me? Those guns are not going to keep you from being able to stop the full force of the U.S. military. And then we found out, actually, some of the military are on their side, so maybe they think that they can be emboldened. And they have been, and they are. And January 6th was evidence of that emboldenment, if there's such a word. So, here we are. We've been arguing ballots over bullets, and they said, no, we got the guns. I saw another statistic, too, that apparently Republicans pretty much control about 80%. Is that right? I might be a little high there, but a tremendous amount of gun ownership. the actual physical accumulation of guns are in the hands of mostly Republicans. I would say that there's a sizable number of Democratic voters who are gun owners as well. We just don't make a big deal about it because we don't think that we have to show our guns to prove that we have you-know-what. A big you-know-what if you're a guy. So we don't need to. But there's plenty that do. And I think the other side, they better take heed. And better yet, how about not using bullets to decide what we need to do in terms of filling the potholes in the street? I'd much rather vote on it. You know, here in Jackson County, actually, the only thing that we are voting on is the county assessor. That the county wants to stop the assessor from being a position that is voted for. They want to make it appointed. And I have a little bit of an issue with that. I know what they're getting at is that the qualifications to be county assessor are not as, quote, great as the new appointment law would demand. Though, I think that if you're appointed, that might be rough, right? So, I don't know. I decided to fall on the side of democracy and that we should vote for these. These are traditionally voted for positions. And I thought, well, you know, why don't we just maintain that? I'm not convinced, at least in this county, that political partisanship would be put to the side while they decide on who should be the county assessor by qualifications alone. Because what will the qualifications be? What I'm afraid the qualifications will be, not only that you've managed and that you have an appraiser license, for instance, or that you've done accounting or you've done assessment. I think that the qualification might be, do you think JFK Jr. is going to announce that he faked his death and he's going to run with Donald Trump? I'm afraid that is what the qualifications will be. So what is on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe as we start off on this Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays? Well, as of course, at the top, as I mentioned, Dolly Litwick broke down how the arguments during or at SCOTUS laid bare the absurdity of that Texas abortion law, and rightfully so. On the rest of the menu, the House GOP wants to end funeral assistance for COVID-19 victims. That's how they are. An Orange County, California Superior Court judge delivered the big drug makers their first trial win in the far-ranging opioid litigation. And the Arizona Supreme Court will consider an appeal blocking the state's school mask ban. Oh, which reminds me, Ducey and his wife took off to Europe. Anniversary. See ya. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the United Nations accused the Congo army of beating a human rights defender to death. And Japanese Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi has accepted the Secretary General post in the ruling party. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon site. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford to send us the equivalent of what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, if you're able to send those funds to us once a month, it really helps. It helps us pay our bills, get the needed software upgrades, and actual physical machinery replacements that are obviously needed after so much time. Yes, that will help us so much, and we thank those of you who have been so generous over these many years, and we also thank those of you who are considering to be generous in the future. We need the help. This is not an easy operation to keep above water, and I'll tell you why. Because we're not Republicans. No one is throwing vast amounts of money at us because, well, we're fighting against fascism, not for it. And apparently fighting against fascism is not a money-making operation. It's only there to save representative democracy, which costs money, doesn't make money, apparently. Anyway, we have a duty, and we are, we're obligated to fulfill our duty because that's the way we are. And we have you to thank for it, so thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that posted up on Twitter and other social media platforms because the show notes and links are where the real reportage can be found. So check it out. Don't rely on my jocular attempt at, reading the news. Anyway, if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West. And please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays is by Josh Israel out of the American Independent. House Republicans are trying to cut a provision in the American Rescue Plan that provides families of COVID-19 victims with up to $9,000 in funeral costs. Colorado Rep. Lauren Boebert introduced a bill on last Thursday to prohibit the use of federal funds for funeral expenses related to COVID-19. Boebert named the proposal, get this, the Stop Appropriations for Obsequies Costs Act, or the Stop AOC Act. See what she did there? An apparent reference to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. In recent months, conservatives have circulated a deceptively edited video that appeared to show Ocasio-Cortez, who championed the funeral assistance funds, with encouraging people to alter death certificates improperly to claim those benefits. That video has since been debunked, with fact-checkers noting her suggestion was taken out of context. Unedited footage, in fact, shows the New York Congresswoman encouraging people to reach out to the hospitals that issue the certificates if their loved one's death from COVID-19 earlier in the pandemic had not been correctly attributed to the disease. Boebert's bill has already attracted 6 GOP co-sponsors. Andrew Clyde of Georgia, Gohmert of Texas, Jody Heiss of Georgia, Brian Mast of Florida, Mary Miller of Illinois, and Ralph Norman of South Carolina. Her office did not respond to an inquiry about why she wants to discontinue this particular benefit, leaving victims' families to pay for those expenses on their own. Boebert, along with every House and Senate Republican, voted against the COVID-19 rescue plan that included the funds, with the Colorado Congresswoman criticizing the $1.9 trillion package as a radical socialist agenda. Well, that's because she's a Nazi. And to Nazis, anything that helps people is socialist. The FEMA funds, up to $9,000 per funeral, are currently available to the families of anyone who died from COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic. To date, FEMA says it has provided more than $1 billion to over 176,000 people for funeral costs. Still, not everyone has taken advantage of the benefits. Ed Michael Reggie, an industry expert and founder and CEO of Funeralocity, a cost-comparing website, told an Oklahoma radio station in September that only about 40% of qualifying families have applied for the benefits thus far. It must be that people don't know, and also that people fear that it's going to be a mountain of red tape and busy work, I'm guessing, Reggie told K4 TV in a separate October interview. It's amazing to me, he added. There are no income requirements. You make a phone call to an 844 number, and a FEMA representative walks you through about a 20-minute phone call. Nate Raymond of Reuters brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A California judge yesterday, Monday, said he would rule against several large counties that accused 4 drug makers of fueling the U.S. opioid epidemic, saying they failed to prove their $50 billion case. Orange County Superior Court Judge Peter Wilson issued a tentative ruling finding that Johnson & Johnson, Teva Pharmaceutical Industries, Endo International, and Abbey Inc.'s Algerin unit not liable. It marked the first trial for any drug companies in the more than 3,300 lawsuits filed by states and local governments over a drug abuse crisis that the U.S. government says led to nearly 500,000 opioid overdose deaths over 2 decades. The ruling came as Johnson & Johnson, known as J&J, and the 3 largest U.S. drug distributors, McKesson Corp., Cardinal Health Inc., and AmerisourceBergen, worked to finalize a proposed deal to pay up to $26 billion to settle the thousands of cases against them. A bankruptcy judge in August approved a settlement by OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma and its wealthy Sackler family owners of the claims against them that the company values at more than $10 billion. During a months-long non-jury trial, the populous Santa Clara, Los Angeles, and Orange counties and the city of Oakland argued that drug makers' marketing downplayed opioids' addictive risks and promoted them for broader uses than intended. They argued the advertising led to billions of pain pills flooding their communities and a rise in overdose deaths. They said the company should pay more than $50 billion to cover the costs of abating the public nuisance they created, plus penalties. But Wilson said even if the drug makers' marketing contained any misleading statements, the counties put forward no evidence to show that their promotional activities caused any medically inappropriate prescriptions to be written. He agreed with the companies that the epidemic could not be considered a legal public nuisance because the federal government and the state had, at the time, determined the benefits of medically appropriate prescriptions outweighed their harms. There is simply no evidence to show that the rise in prescriptions was not the result of the medically appropriate provision of pain medications to patients in need, Wilson wrote. J&J in a statement said the decision showed its marketing was appropriate and responsible. John Houston, Endo's lawyer, said it demonstrated his client's lawful conduct did not cause the widespread public nuisance at issue in the plaintiff's complaint. TEVA, in a statement, said it continues to pursue a national settlement framework and that the ruling was a clear win for patients who would benefit from comprehensive settlements being finalized. Representatives for the California plaintiffs did not respond to requests for comment. They could potentially challenge the tentative ruling before it becomes final. Tentative decisions are typical in California state courts. In a statement, the lead lawyers overseeing related federal lawsuits against the companies, Jane Conroy, Paul Farrell, and Joe Rice, said they strongly disagreed with the ruling and stressed that it did not impact related cases nationally. The only other opioid trial to reach a verdict resulted in an Oklahoma judge in 2019 ordering J&J to pay $465 million to the state. J&J is appealing that decision. Bob Christie of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The Arizona Supreme Court will hear arguments today in an appeal of a court ruling that found new laws banning schools from requiring masks and a series of other measures were unconstitutional. Republican Attorney General Mark Brnovich wants the court to overturn that ruling and allow provisions in the state budget legislation that were blocked be able to take effect. The High Court will hear 40 minutes of arguments at 9:30 today, and I guess that's Mountain Time. Maricopa County Superior Court Judge Catherine Cooper issued a ruling on September 27th blocking the school mask ban and a host of other provisions in the state budget package from going into force on September 29th. She sided with education groups that had argued the bills were packed with policy items unrelated to the budget and violated the state's constitution requirement that subjects be related and expressed in the title of the bills. Cooper's ruling cleared the way for K through 12 public schools to continue requiring students to wear masks and to help slow the spread of the coronavirus. At least 29 of the state's public school districts issued mask mandates before the laws were set to take effect, and some immediately extended them after Cooper's ruling. Arizona cities and counties were also able to enact mask requirements and other COVID-19 rules that would have been blocked by the budget's bills. Republican opponents of school mask requirements and local COVID-19 restrictions were powerless to immediately pass new versions of the laws. That's because of a series of GOP vacancies in the closely split Arizona House that prevented them from mustering a majority without Democratic support. Cooper's sweeping ruling also struck non-virus provisions that were slipped into the state budget and an entire budget measure that had served as a vehicle for a conservative policy wish list. They included a required investigation of social media companies and the stripping of the Democratic Secretary of State of her duty to defend election laws. The state is raising many of the same arguments in its appeal that were rejected by Cooper. They include that the education groups have no right to sue, and that if the High Court does agree with the trial judge and the legislation violated the Constitution's title and single subject provisions, it should allow the laws to take effect and make its ruling only apply going forward. The state is mainly trying to persuade the justices that there are not constitutional faults It argues that the subjects they contain were all related and generally identified in the bill title. Attorneys for the group of education advocates that sued, including the Arizona School Board Association, said the lower court got it right. The trial court relied on well-settled precedent and properly ruled that each of the challenged laws was passed in violation of the Constitution. Attorney Rupali Desai wrote in her brief to the court, if the Supreme Court upholds Cooper's decisions, it will have far-reaching ramifications for the legislature. Republicans who control the Senate and House have long ignored the constitutional requirement that budget bills deal only with spending items. Lawmakers have packed them with policy items, and this year majority Republicans were especially aggressive. That's right, because they are. Illegally, I might add. Well, that brings us to our break, and why don't we go to our break? And when we get back from said break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. Some sounds are spooky. Some are unpleasant. And some are entirely unsettling. But some sounds are like nothing you've ever heard before, and nothing you'd ever want to hear again. That was the sound of 2-hydroxybenzaldehyde. And if you're thinking, molecules don't make noise, well, you're right. But that discordant nightmare was an audible soundscape that represents the chemical properties of 2-hydroxybenzaldehyde. And what's even more eerie is that while that sound may have made you want to crawl out of your skin and skitter towards the door, the chemical itself has a similar effect on ants. That's according to a study in the journal Patterns.
The world of insects is full of chemical compounds.
Jean-Luc Bouvet of the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Sciences in Brussels.
Thomas Eisner, who set up the field of chemical ecology, he said that the insects are the best chemists on Earth. And he said this as a kind of joke, but he was totally true in saying this, because insects are producing a huge amount of different chemicals for different purposes,
including keeping themselves and their families safe.
Many other insects groups are producing volatiles and other compounds to defend themselves against predators.
Like an overpowering perfume, these volatile secretions waft through the air and irritate critters who might be thinking of noshing on the bugs that produce them. Bouvet, in particular, studies the larvae of sawfly species, which produce different cocktails of chemicals that act as a repellent, especially against ants. But Bouvet is not only an entomologist, he's also an amateur musician. And he got to thinking, well, smells transmit a signal by drifting through the air. And so do sounds.
So I thought that it would be quite interesting to go deeper into this parallel between the perception via two different sensory systems, namely smelling and hearing. So the idea was to convert these volatiles into sounds. Then to compare, on the one hand, predators reacting against the volatiles with, on the other hand, humans hearing sounds that represent these volatiles.
Step 1 was transforming aroma into audio. To do that, Bouvet and his colleague Rudy Gillot of the Higher Industrial Institute of Brussels turned to a process called sonification, which translates chemical parameters into sounds.
The chemical parameters that we used, for instance, it was the molecular weight of the compound or the fact that a compound possesses or not some functional groups. By functional group, I mean an alcohol group or a ketone group or an aldehyde group or acid group.
These molecular properties were then mapped to musical qualities like pitch and tone, duration and timbre, even reverberation.
Doing so, we built up a library of the molecular sounds obtained by converting each molecule into one sound.
So acetic acid, basically a concentrated vinegar, sounds like... while geraniol, an isomer of citral, which is a main component of the oil in a citrus fruit's peel, sounds more like... Bouvet's not the first to use sonification to convert chemical data into audio waves. As early as the 1970s, geneticists were transforming the 4 letters of DNA sequences into tunes that were, well, not exactly chart-topping.
The sounds were not very nice, not very rich, because if you have only 4 tones, then the music or the sounds that you hear are very monotonous.
The insect irritants were much more interesting, because each species produces its own signature chemical blend. Bouvet and Guyot mimicked those molecular mixtures by taking the individual chemical sounds and mixing them together on a soundboard, using different volumes to represent the concentrations of compounds in each species' toxic concoction. That's the chemical stylings of Nematodes tibialis, a locust sawfly larva, which is heavy on the dolichodiol, an essential oil that some plants use as an insect repellent. And this pungent tune helps keep Hoplocampa testudinia, the European apple sawfly, from being eaten. But that's just the setup. Then came the experiment. Bouvet exposed ants to the actual chemicals, either individually or in mixtures, and recorded how thoroughly the predators were repulsed by each. And for the sonified sounds, volunteers would play clips of single molecules or mixtures and listen to the sounds from a pair of loudspeakers.
Then we asked them to go backward, to walk backward, until they were at the comfort zone. And I was noting the distance that they walked backward.
And he found that the molecules and mixtures that were most annoying to ants were the same ones that, when sonified, caused the volunteers to retreat.
And many told me that some sounds were quite frightening, and that's why they went backward.
But Bouvet isn't in it for the scares. The correlation between a chemical's effect on ants and a sound's effect on people means that he can use sonification to study the defensive sense of new species, or species for which it might be hard to scare up a specimen. Scare up? Get it? For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hit them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
What is so supreme about the Supreme Court? I mean, besides being housed in an imposing marble building, being the final stop on America's judicial train, and having its 9 members look photogenically authoritarian in those full-body black robes. And yes, its existence is written into the Constitution, but so is Congress, and no one thinks of it as anything supreme. We 330 million Americans are told we must obey the law as defined by a half-dozen unelected lawyers on this court. Why should we democratic citizens do that? After all, these legalistic elites have no actual power to force their personal beliefs on us. There's no Supreme Court army. In fact, their sole source of power is one that is intangible, extremely fragile, and easily frittered away: public trust. We should go along with their rulings only if they appear to be fair and honest, not based on personal whim or partisan ideology, and not meant to extend plutocratic power over the people. As Justice Elena Kagan rightly put it, the only way we can get people to do what we think they should do is because people respect us. That's where the present majority of far-right-wing appointees have failed so abjectly. Rather than meeting a lofty standard of judiciousness, all 6 have pulled the court down into the mire of crass Republican politics. They've corrupted the system and jiggered the law to decree that corporate campaign cash is free speech, that the state can take over women's bodies, that the Republican Party can unilaterally shut millions of voters out of America's voting booths, and so awful much more that enthrones the few over the many. This is Jim Hightower saying, respect? Trust? The Republican court is already down to 40% public approval rating, having surrendered its legitimacy to be a governing authority over us. Howdy-ho, folks. Thanks for tuning in and sharing my weekly commentaries. Also, please join me for a live web show I host every other Tuesday, the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe. You can join the action live online as I chat with grassroots leaders and progressive sparklies from around the country. Go to hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew to find out about upcoming guests and watch past episodes. That's hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew.
It was 1963, and Only in America, recorded by Jay and the Americans, was a big hit.
I'm singer-songwriter Patty Larkin, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
The group's lead singer, Jay Black, had what the New York Times described as a velvet voice and an extraordinary vocal range. Jay and the Americans was a group comprised of 4 white men, with their race and gender reflected in their music. Only in America, with its lyrics about a working-class boy who found love with a classy girl, reflected in America where for white men, particularly in the fantasy world of rock and roll, all things felt possible. However, Songfacts reports that Only in America, as first written and recorded by the Drifters, had a chorus that protested racism. Atlantic Records balked at those lyrics, the Drifters refused to release the song with new patriotic lyrics, and it ended up being recorded and released by Jay and the Americans. Only in America's message of opportunity and freedom and equality wasn't remotely true for many when it was recorded, and it still isn't remotely true today. But Jay and the Americans were a force in pop music, and their hits, some with problematic lyrics, remain a staple of every oldies playlist because their music was amazing. Jay Black died in October. He was 82.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1955. That was the day that the song 16 Tons first made an appearance on the Billboard Country Music Chart. It would reach the top spot and stay there for 10 weeks. 16 Tons told the story of the hard lives faced by coal miners. The song talks about falling into debt at the company store, a reality faced by many coal mining families. The song had first been recorded by Merle Travis in the mid-1940s. The song borrowed lyrics from things that Merle had heard from his father, who was a coal miner. Merle Travis sung the songs of working people. He was labeled a red and communist, and during that era, stations would not play his music. 16 Tons was recorded again by Tennessee Ernest Jennings Ford in 1955. Tennessee Ernie's grandfather and uncle had both been in the mines. Tennessee began to perform 16 Tons to enthusiastic crowds. He then recorded it as a B-side to his single, You Don't Have to Be a Baby to Cry, for Capitol Records. But the B-side recording became a hit. The song was so popular, it jumped off the country charts and took the pop music #1 spot for 8 weeks and became a gold record. Since then, 16 Tons has been covered by a variety of artists, from Johnny Cash to Tom Jones and Tom Morello to ZZ Top, and has become a true labor standard. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 52 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of around 60 to 61. Cloudy skies throughout the day, winds light and variable. And we will have a low of 47 tonight, mostly cloudy. Winds will remain light and variable. Though it does, on another pane here, say that we should be getting about 1/3 of an inch of rain overnight. Though they say tomorrow we will have cloudy skies early and become partly cloudy later in the day. Highs around 70 with winds light and variable. And then rain coming in very heavy Wednesday night, and then for the next 7 days or more. So we have that to look forward to. And I still need to have the walkways and patio coated with the non-stick solution. And we need to have dry weather for that, or at least not raining. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have been updated from Friday and now stand. Confirmed cases of infection now stands at 235,077 folks, and our deceased have increased, looks like about 6, and now stands at 321 confirmed dead. And they still continue to whine about wearing masks and pretty much act like dicks in public. But that's how it is here, and we don't like it one bit. Let's see. Pollen is rated as none outside the window in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is good at 21 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.17 inches. Visibility is at 6 miles, and relative humidity is at 99%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 53 degrees and sunny. Paris is 53 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 70 degrees and fair. Kyiv is 45 with light rain. Kabul is 48 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 73 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 61 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 66 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees and cloudy. And New York, New York is 52 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Forward Holland of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The United Nations yesterday, Monday, accused Democratic Republic of Congo's army of beating to death a human rights activist protesting illegal taxes in the war-torn east of the country. Cabral Yambo, the leader of a civil society group in Hombo Town, was killed by soldiers operating on the orders of local administrative officials, the UN Joint Human Rights Office said on Twitter. An army spokesman could not immediately be reached for comment. Partnership for Integrated Protection, a local human rights group, said Yambo was tortured on Friday and died of his injuries at a hospital in the city of Bukavu on Sunday. I condemn the torture, which led to the death of Mr. Cabral Yambo, said Juvenal Munubo, a local lawmaker. Responsibility must be established. Poorly trained, equipped, and paid, state agents were responsible for 2/3 of human rights violations in Congo in August, the last available month for data, according to the United Nations.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Kiyoshi Takanaka of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has tapped Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi for the number 2 post in the ruling party, a powerful role that includes shaping policy and finance election campaigns. Motegi will replace Akira Amari, who said he would vacate the position of Liberal Democratic Party Secretary General following his defeat in Sunday's lower house election. Known for being well-versed in policy matters and on good terms with party members such as former Prime Ministers Shinzo Abe and Taro Aso, Motegi will likely help Kishida maintain his grip on power within the party. His appointment is expected to be formally announced on Thursday. The job of ruling party Secretary General offers huge sway over lawmakers because the holder is in charge of financing campaigns and pulling fractious members into line. Motegi told reporters yesterday, Monday, one of his key tasks as new Secretary General was preparing for an upper house election due around the middle of next year. Kishida led the LDP to better-than-expected election results, and the party kept its strong majority in the lower house. Amiri's loss was a notable setback for the party, although he retains a parliament seat thanks to Japan's system of proportional representation. Kyoto News Agency and other media said Yoshimasa Hayashi, age 60, had emerged as a candidate for foreign minister without citing sources. Besides having served as defense minister, Hayashi has also held the economy, education, and agricultural portfolios. The left-leaning CDPJ lost 13 seats, although it remained Japan's second biggest party. The smaller Japan Innovation Party, which calls for deregulation and decentralization of authority to spur growth, almost quadrupled its haul to 41 seats in the 465-seat chamber. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme aux langues de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.